can I describe the scene of you know, one of the big protest sites?
Oh, absolutely. We love that. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so you know, in some ways, I might have texted you guys even, I think, while I was there. Like, it felt a little bit like Burning Man, like in some ways. Just a sprawling tent city. And
And where was this? Where was this protest site? Was this near Delhi?
Yeah, this was the Singh border leading into Delhi, on one of the major toll highways, which are a new thing. They weren't there the last time I went to India, which was late 2012, early 2013. And we arrived like sort of later in the day, and it happened to be the Sikh holiday of Vaisakhi, which is one of the bigger Sikh holidays, and it was also the first day of Ramadan. And like when we arrived, we kind of went straight to the main stage to start off with. I was with my elderly mother, so you know, her mobility was kind of restricted, and you know, we went and we sat down. We had like one of the communal meals, which is part of the Sikh tradition. It's the Sikh religion is explicitly anti-caste, and one of the ways that this is really driven home is, you know, if you go to any gurdwara, any like Sikh house of worship, there's a communal meal available like 24 hours a day. People all sit on the floor. You know, elders can sit at tables and chairs, you know, if they have restricted mobility. But you know, even you know, hundreds of years ago, when the you know, Muslim emperor like wanted to visit the Sikh Guru, he was required to sit among the masses, like on the ground at the same level as everybody else, and take part in this meal, where, you know, people who get called like untouchables might be serving on him, you know, might be seated next to him. I mean, and people were murdered like just for, you know, touching somebody of an upper caste. And so, you know, so this is like fairly radical challenge to that social order. And these protests, you know, even they're not explicitly like religious in nature. We've seen other communities like the Hindu farmers and Muslim farmers taking part in these communal meals also, and coming together and working together. One of the Hindu protest leaders, Rakesh Tikait, was actually implicated in anti-Muslim riots. I don't know the exact year, but fairly recently. Those same groups have set aside their differences and are working together at this point. So yeah, going back to that scene, we had the meal, then we went and we were waiting for the person we were there to meet to become available. He was in a meeting at the time, and so we sat and listened to the speeches for a while. And the very first speaker was a man from Tamil Nadu, from Chennai, which is you know, clear across India. His name is Tirumurugan. And the Tamils, they just go by one name. he's a mechanical engineer himself, but he comes from a family of farmers. His brothers all still farm, and he gave a speech, and expressed that this movement has been characterized by Modi as largely North Indian, and I mean, the simple fact is that Delhi is in the north, and it's just a lot easier for people in the surrounding states, whether it's Uttar Pradesh, Punjab, Haryana, Rajasthan. Those are the people that you see in the largest numbers, but a large part of that is just a function of the nearness. People who are living hand to mouth are not able to travel, but there are solidarity actions being held, and there are different contingencies of representatives being sent to go and show their support, and in the state of Andhra Pradesh, I believe it is, or Karnataka, the local state assembly has been occupied by farmer groups. So my hope for this movement is, going back, so that man from Tamil Nadu, from Chennai, he spoke. Then somebody sang the Indian national anthem. Then, it being the first day of Ramadan, there was, right at sunset, there was the I believe it's called the Rosa, the fast breaking prayer, at sunset, because people don't eat while the sun is up during Ramadan. So, so we had, this man of Brahmin origin, who I spoke to him later. He considers himself a Buddhist, and he says that there's just too much caste politics in Hinduism, and so he's rejected his own Brahmin background. Yeah, like I said, that guy spoke. Then there was the Indian national anthem. Then there was the Muslim prayer. Then there was a Sikh prayer, and then that was followed by a competition of Sikh martial arts, which was pretty cool, set to some electronic dance beats and stuff. There was a woman, at least one woman, who was participating with swords and staffs and kicking ass. And I went in there, you called me a journalist. I'm not a trained journalist. I don't claim to be a journalist. I'm a fiction writer. I went in there with an open mind, but looking for a reaffirmation of my own beliefs. And I was a little disappointed. I lost heart for a minute. And that was when I spoke to the person who was hosting my mother and me at the protest site. He's one of the leaders of the 32 unions that are that have organized this protest. I asked him, I was asking about the decision making, how has this broad coalition stayed together and remain unified and disciplined. So I was asking, how do they make their decisions? And he told me it's the leaders of these 32 unions, they debate and they vote, and then everybody goes along with the majority. And to me, it's important, you know, that that women be involved in this, and also that the landless workers be represented. And so I asked him, you know, well, do the landless have any representation in these meetings, in these where all the decisions are made? And he kind of like, you know, knit his brow and kind of looked at me and he said, no, this is a farmers movement, which was really disappointing to me. You know, that's not what I wanted to hear. And basically this man who, you know, is a card carrying communist, still sees caste. And, you know, at that moment, like, I was like, oh man, is this a movement of just like wealthy landlords? And, you know, can I really get behind that? You know, even though my own background is of that same class. And so, you know, I became somewhat ambivalent about it. And, you know, as I told you guys, then I finally got a chance to speak to this filmmaker, Randeep Madoke. And, you know, like you said, I hope you guys can put up a link to his documentary. He's working on a new one about the protests specifically. But, you know, the way he tells it, he supports, you know, he comes from a landless background himself. You know, he has seen and documented like the worst of the abuses that some, not all, but some of the landowning class like have perpetrated. And his response was that this, and this is a direct quote, the farmers' protest is like the last remaining hope for Indian democracy. Like the farmers' movement, if anything can defeat the BJP, like it's gonna be the farmers' movement. And so I'm gonna go along with his recommendation. And you know, according to him, like if this fight is lost, then like all is lost. And so he's willing to shelve his other gripes over caste and all the ugliness that like all the baggage that comes with that. Set that aside, leave that for another day, just to get the Hindu nationalist BJP like Nazis out of power. And so, you know,
it's a little bit like the concept of two revolutions. One, we need to get rid of the authoritarians, and then two, we need to get rid of the liberals and have something like further left, something along those lines.
Yeah, basically. And, you know, as like I'm most critical of my own people, he was somewhat critical of his own people too. He was like, you know, we need to get organized and we need to fight that fight, and you know, stop fighting amongst ourselves. So, you know, with some reservations, but a great deal of hope. Like, I'm supporting this movement, and I encourage, you know, lefty comrades like worldwide to do the same. I see great potential also for this movement. And I think it's somewhat necessary for it to succeed too, to connect the dots, you know, to connect the dots between like Mexican farmers, you know, who rose up like under the Zapatistas in the 90s, the MST in Brazil, landless workers, you know, who've been, you know, fighting since the 80s, the South Korean farmers who still have gripes. You know, we had like a really ugly and failed land reform land reform, I say in air quotes, under Mugabe and Zimbabwe in the early 2000s. Like, this is a big issue that impacts us all. And, you know, Elizabeth Warren ran on a platform which was was supposed to address like some of the agricultural subsidies and things like that here in the States. Here in the States, we have, you know, farmers who are at present, I think, organizing against like big agribusiness, like John Deere, for example, who make these tractors, which, you know, farmers are not allowed to repair on their own. They've got all this proprietary software, and, you know, they might need to replace a $50 part or something, but legally they're required to like tow their big combines like hundreds of miles to go get it done by an official like John Deere, you know, repair facility, and like are legally prohibited from like working on their own machinery. And also, you know, I stayed with a friend up in the mountains. I got away for a little bit, and he's a bit of a libertarian. And so he is somewhat in favor of these liberal reforms, reforms, again in air quotes. But he actually visited the States a couple of years ago, and he made the comment, he was like, the food there tastes like nothing, you know, like you go to India and, you know, people may be poor, but like the food like actually tastes like something. Like a tomato tastes like a tomato, a cucumber tastes like a cucumber. It's not just like, you know, water, like basically.
Land.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah, this is, it's really beautiful in the way that it has united a very fragmented and fractured country, and yeah, I see hope and potential for it. And very quickly, also, there was you know, one of the big flashpoints in this protest took place on January 26th, when the farmers had been camped out for 2 months at that point. They had planned a tractor parade like through New Delhi, and it was permitted and everything. There was one contingency, and this seemed like a moment when the movement could have fallen apart. So there was one contingent of, January 26th is Republic Day in India. It's the day when the Constitution was implemented in 1950. You know, they got independence in 1947 from the British, and then the Constitution was adopted it went into effect on January 26th of 1950. And so that is celebrated every year at a place called the Red Fort in Old Delhi. And, you know, the prime minister appears there. They have like great fanfare. And one contingent, one group of the parade broke through the police barricades and went to the Red Fort and like mounted the flagpole, and they hung up a Sikh flag. And there's a lot of conspiracy theories being floated out there, which I actually do subscribe to. The young man who hoisted that flag has previously campaigned for the BJP, and he was, you know, one of the more like vocal agitators, and he was like trying to what's the word that we use? Like instigate, like some kind of, more like destructive tactics where like,
Provocateur.
yeah, provocateur, there you go, agent provocateur. And like, it's by many like believed to be an inside job because to access the red forts like at any time like is like almost impossible. Like it's a very like high security area, and this was on the day when all these politicians, including the prime minister, were supposed to be appearing there later in the day. And the fact that they were allowed anywhere near there, let alone inside there, is really suspicious. And this guy's background also, like as like a very recent campaigner for the BJP. And so, it seemed like for a day, that whole day of January 26th, that the movement was going to be over because the pro-Modi media were trying to discredit the movement as like a Sikh separatist sort of thing, and say like, oh, these are just like these people like just want to like fracture India, and they're terrorists and whatnot. And fortunately, like that day, one of the Hindu union leaders, his name is Rakesh Tikait, he comes from a family of organizers. He himself is personally responsible for instigating anti-Muslim riots like in recent years. He sort of fell apart like on stage. He started weeping, and it was his weeping which brought out more people. It actually brought out Muslim farmers from his own area, and breathed new life into the movement at a moment when it seemed like it could fail. So if you hear anything about like, they've tried so many smear campaigns, like people have been very generous, from the diaspora, like down to the locals who live in the areas where these encampments have sprung up. So one of the, and a lot of the farmers who are camped out, occupying this space and protest, like their elders. A lot of the younger generation are like back home working on the farms. And it's also interesting, like they come and they stay in shifts. So like people will go home for a stretch and someone else will come take their place, like from the village, from the same family. They do it like in groups of 10. So, yes, they've been there for 6 months at this point, but it's, not necessarily the same people the whole time. And it's all very smart and well organized, and it's beautiful. They've got like swamp coolers on their tents that are run by solar. There's like free laundry, and one of my questions was like, where do 100,000 people go to the bathroom? But they've got facilities for that. The locals are allowing them access to like bathe and like use your restrooms, and it's they brought provisions to last for some months, and in a lot of cases they haven't even unloaded their trucks and their trailers because they're getting so many donations, like just from the locals. So it's really beautiful and inspiring in a lot of ways. And I really hope that, and this is something that I want to work on personally, is reaching out with the spirit of internationalism, and asking how we can support the struggles of farmers in other places and turn this into a global conversation.